Exactly 1 year ago, I set up my very first saltwater aquarium after binge watching hundreds of hours of YouTube tutorials. And instead of following the traditional route of using a sump or an all-in-one system, I chose the more niche option of using a canister filter. A decision that had a lot of mixed reactions at the time when I released my first video. But exactly 365 days later, I've got quite the journey to share, so I hope you'll enjoy this 6-chapter video of the last 365 days. I've been wanting to create a reef tank for as long as I can remember, but I've never been brave enough to give it a go because of the cost and the potential workload. But recently, I spent a hell of a long time watching all 46 episodes of the Ultimate Beginner series from Bulk Reef Supply, and I figure I might as well give it a go. Technology seems to have progressed quite a lot over the years, and a lot of the things that were really hard in the hobby have now become quite a lot easier. At least that's the main impression that I've got so far. So while I wait for my vampire crab paludariums to grow in, I'm going to start this little side project, which is kind of ironic considering the Great Barrier Reef was on my doorstep and I now live 15,000 kilometers away. Unlike most of my other videos, this series is going to be more of a journey rather than a guide, as I see how well I can convert YouTube knowledge over to real world results. First things first though, I've rearranged the current base of operations here. Things are a little bit more streamlined. I've converted the nano tank shelf over to a shallow tank shelf, which is going to be dominated by the shallow reef tank at the top and 2 other freshwater aquascapes below that. And at the moment there's 6 tanks over there and quite a few pretty cool projects underway. The problem is I just have to wait quite a while for all the plants to grow in to make shooting them worthwhile. The tank I'm using for this shallow nano reef tank is a custom made tank that's 70 centimeters by 35 by 20 centimeters. It's made out of 5mm float glass, which is about 50 liters or 13 US gallons. I'll leave the imperial measurements on the screen as well. Cost me $37 and it comes with the lid. It's nothing special, but it's definitely all I need for my first reef tank. All the other tanks on the shelf are also made in similar dimensions from the same place. The most important part and the most expensive part of this project was the light, which is a Fluval Sea Marine 3.0 Nano, which cost me $100. It was the only decent light I could find here, but you usually get what you pay for, and the app functions are pretty good, so I'm looking forward to see some good results out of this. If you're interested in what happens with this light, let me know and I'll put up a video about it a little bit later on. For filtering, I'm using a Sun 302 100 liters per hour or 264 gallons per hour canister filter. This cost me $55 a couple of years ago. I've been using it for fresh water, but I'm going to convert it over to salt for this tank. The flow rate is obviously going to drop with this once I add the full complement of media. This is going to be more than enough for what I need, as I'm also going to be using a wave maker. To save myself a lot of hassle, I'm also using an ATO, so an auto top-off unit. This one is from F-Zone, cost me $53, and it's going to save me a lot of time dealing with evaporation. Though that again should be minimized because I'm also going to be using a full covered glass lid, which is in 3 parts, to make dealing with maintenance and stuff a lot easier. So the hardest part of this entire build so far was finding glass lily pipes that would fit the depth of the tank. F-Zone was the only one that I could find a set for in this size, so I chose the Mini Nano Lily Pipe Skimmer set in 13mm, which cost me $54. And to keep things nice and clean and simple inside the tank, I'm going to be using a Sun E300 inline heater, which cost $26. It's probably overpowered for the build, but it's the best inline option I could find that wasn't going to cost $1 million. As always, the tank's sitting on a leveling mat, and I have a white background on, which in total cost me $4. Another rather expensive part of the process was getting the rock. I ended up getting twice as much as I actually needed, and this box of Arca Reef rocks here cost about $80. It's 20 kilos or 44 pounds. I picked mixed sizes and only used about 10 kilos for this build, but it was interesting to see the variance in weight between the sizes of the rock and the density. So it was definitely worth ordering a little bit more than I actually needed to come up with the hardscape that I really liked. I then spent about a week fine-tuning the hardscape to how I wanted it, and this is probably a little bit pointless in reefing and more of a freshwater hobbyist habit. I already know I'll need to change a few things most likely, because once I add livestock and I have to start dealing with flow patterns and getting the lighting perfected, things are more than likely going to change. But for now, this is how I want it and it looks really good.
You got it. You got it. You got it. I know sometimes life can be tough, and you feel like you just had enough. When you're thinking everything is gone wrong, just remember that I'm here to cheer you on. Yeah, I wanna pick you up from the ground, let you know that I'm always around. 'Cause I know we can make it, yes we can make it if we try. Keep on trying. You got it. I believe in you. You got it. I know you got this. You got it. Just keep on trying. You got it.
Now that I have the hardscape in, I can add sand. I'm using 3 kilos or 6 pounds of 1mm Happet Aragonite sand. This bag was about $4. Surprisingly, choosing a grain size was tricky, so I went with the smallest for the easiest turnover to make keeping algae off the sand a lot easier. But it also has its downsides because when it comes to flow, my wave maker and canister filter are probably going to cause some sand nados. This stuff is super dusty, so I should have washed it a few times beforehand, but putting clumpy wet sand into the tank doesn't look as pretty on film. So to solve this, I'll put some filter floss in my filter, turn on the wave maker and the filter, turn everything on to max, and then stir the sand up until it captures all the dust. Then I'll just rinse everything out and the problem will be sorted. I've got a couple of extra bags of sand here just in case it turns out not to be enough, but for now I think a thin layer across the bottom of the tank, spread out evenly, should be fine. The wave maker I'm using for this tank is a Jabeo SCP-50, which is rated for tanks up to 50 centimeters and cost about $80. Because this is a shallow tank, it is essentially way overpowered, and when set to max it basically becomes a sand nado generator. It's got a ton of flow options that randomize the flow and the power, which is going to be really helpful, so I'll put together a video on that with my experiences of it once I've had it for a while and I know that it's actually doing its job. I can now fill the tank with RO water, so with my unit this is going to take about 2 to 3 hours to fill, but I'm just taking it straight out of the unit. For the first time filling this tank, I'm not going to be pre-mixing my salt for the suggested 24 to 48 hours, I'm just going to fill it with RO water then slowly add my salt. However, once the tank is cycled and I have livestock, I'll be preparing the salt mix properly to the right temperature and doing water changes that way. There's no other way to do it, it's the safest option. The first time I'm adding salt to this tank, I'm going to be filling it a little bit less than required because I need to account for the displacement of the rock and sand, and the goal is to get to 35 ppt. So accounting for displacement in this tank, that works out to be about 1,509 grams or 5.22 ounces. To measure this, I'm just using a salinity refractometer, really cheap and really easy to use. I think mine cost about $30. You can probably get cheaper options, but I did pick a brand name this time. So that's the entire process. So now I'll just start the tank cycling, and the next time you'll see this tank, it's going to be ugly, really, really ugly.
We're the best of friends through thick and thin. That's what we always said and what you believe. But I'm wanting more, can't help longing for your love. Time and again you're let down by him, then you turn to me to ask my advice. And I'm there for you to help you through all the heartache he is causing you. I wish you could see just how good I'd be for you. I keep on waiting for life to begin, for you to love me the way you love him. Seasons change, but my long days lead me nowhere. You'll never love me the way you will always love him. In my dreams I see how you come to me, and you look at me the way I see you. But then I wake again and we're still just friends. Oh, I want you so I just can't let go. Why can't you see you will always be the one? I keep on waiting for life to begin, for you to love me the way you love him. Seasons change, but my long days lead me nowhere. You'll never love me the way you will always love him.
Hello everyone, welcome back. As expected, things got really ugly really quickly, but that is all part of the process, so nothing too unexpected. Quite a lot has happened over the last 72 days since I started filling this tank, so I'm going to go over everything in order, just in case you got a little bit confused by the introductions timeline. It took about 5 weeks for the nitrogen cycle to complete, and that entire time I ran the tank with the lights off, which kept the algae at bay. After day 30, I started testing twice a week, and over the next 10 or so days, things started to level out and the nitrogen peaked at about 40 parts per million, then slowly started to drop off. In the meantime, I also changed and upgraded a few things just for some quality of life improvements. First up, I've removed the ATO, so the auto top off unit, and placed it on one of my freshwater tanks. Having the lids on this tank basically kept the evaporation at 0, so the ATO has been kind of pointless and better used on a different tank. If I ever go on holidays though, or change types of lids, I'll end up putting it back on, so it's definitely there as a spare when I do need it. The other thing that has also changed is the canister filter. I changed to an Oase Biomaster 250 for 2 reasons. The first reason is because it has a really quick access pre-filter, and the second is that it has a slot for a heater, which means I now have space for a backup heater in case my inline heater fails. So inside the canister filter, I just moved everything across from my Sun filter, so it's just running a full stack of ceramic bio rings, a small bag of carbon, and a little bit of live rock as well. I've also had to move the filter from the right hand side of the tank to the left hand side, as the Biomaster was a little bit wider and didn't quite fit in the spot, so I didn't really want to make that change, but I didn't really have a choice either, so it's moved to the opposite side of the tank. I also got a second wave maker, and this one is a tiny Haiger HD951. It's a great little pump, has really low wattage, and it's another backup to have. Again, same old saying. As well as that, I also decided to add a DIY Kato algae reactor. This thing's been really awesome, and it's got my nitrates down to about 0, which is not exactly ideal, so I want to keep them at around 15 parts per million, but it's really interesting how quickly this dropped them. I know not everyone's a big fan of DIY reactors, but this one's working well and it doesn't put any heat into the tank. So it's just a simple Sun 602B 1.6 litre pre-filter, a transparent one obviously, which is then wrapped with about 3 meters of waterproof LEDs, and I'm running those and this little Kato reactor on the opposite cycle to my light cycle. So while my tank light is on during the day, it's off, and then during the night I run the Kato reactor. I also swapped out my stainless steel tube adapter for plastic ones. I didn't see any issues with rust, but it's always better to have plastic in the tank where possible. Originally it was just harder to find these plastic ones, but now that I've got hold of a couple, I'm going to start using them. So far the biggest problem I've had on this tank is the light. It's working fine, but it relies heavily on white lights to get the par levels high enough for the bottom of the tank. I was hoping to run more blues and purples, so I'll be upgrading the light to something a lot more powerful with a bit better coverage and better color representation. There's a lot of good light options out there, but I found an absolute gem for this build, and it looks really good on top of the tank. It's also putting out absolutely fantastic colors. Moving on to the livestock, so the first things I added to the tank were a pair of clownfish on day 47. So the same day that the lights went on for the first time. And just to be 100% sure the cycle was finished, I also started dosing sea chem stability just to make sure I didn't have any issues with the cycle. A couple of days later, I added 3 soft corals, which I picked up for really cheap for about $5 a frag. So these are going to be really good test corals to see how the tank's going. So I got a leather coral, a GSP, and an Anthelia. Unfortunately, the Anthelia ended up dying pretty quickly, which surprised me quite a lot because it's technically the biggest pest in the hobby and one of the toughest corals. Though after doing some research, I do hear that some people have problems with it after doing coral dips, so as annoying as it is, maybe it's the type of coral that I won't be able to coral dip, though that has its risk as well. I'm going to try it again at some stage, along with some pulsing xenia, and see what happens. So that was my first casualty and one of the strangest ones. So far the other corals are doing quite well. When I started to see the first diatoms arrive, I got 2 banded trocus snails, 2 hermit crabs, and a couple of tiny turbo snails. They're absolute machines, and though I don't see the hermit crabs all that often, they do come out at night, and they've also molted a couple of times as well, so they're definitely settled in and they're pretty happy, and they're really fun to watch scurrying around the tank at night. Also, when I picked up the Kato algae, I got given a selection of macro algae, which I've currently placed in the back of the tank, and it's growing super fast, but I haven't actually got a plan for it at the moment, though I have been thinking maybe I'll make a wall of green and red macro algae along the back of the tank, which could be kind of cool. However, if you think that's a stupid idea or you hate the idea, let me know and I'll probably just start myself another little macro algae tank. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that covers everything that's happened so far in the first 72 days. If you have any questions, let me know, and also if you have any tips, let me know as well, because this is definitely still my first reef tank, so I'm open to pretty much anything. And as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Moon in the sky, I'm looking at the moon in the sky. This shouldn't come as a surprise, but I can't sleep. War in my mind, I'm trying to fight a war in my mind. I don't know who's the winner tonight, but it ain't me. Where are you now? When my fears are worse than ever, when the night goes on forever, when I'm losing track of time. Where are you now? When I need you more than ever, when I ain't got together, let me know just where you hide. Where are you now? Why aren't you holding me in the midnight hour, saying I'll be fine? Where are you now? Why aren't you here with me, here to calm me down in the midnight hour?
Monday morning blues. I open my eyes and I'm greeted by a cute little smile. The world is new with you by my side. Everything is beautiful. Tuesday afternoon, I'm calling you home just to hear your voice on the phone. I think of you and I'm not alone. You are everything is beautiful. Sunday morning snooze with breakfast in bed. And I listen to the song in my head. It sings of you and the things that you do. 'Cause you're everything. Under the sky so blue, I found my piece of heaven.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Shallow Reef series. As you can see, quite a lot has changed since episode 2, with the biggest and most obvious change being the light. However, I've also been collecting quite a few different beginner-friendly corals, which we'll go over in a little more detail shortly. But for now, here's a quick look at the current coral map. Starting with the biggest change, I've upgraded to the new Skylight Hyperbar RL60, and it's an absolute beast of a light. The minimalistic design fits the tank perfectly, and with summer just around the corner, it's freed up a fair bit of space at the back of the tank for a cooling system. This is a system I've set up myself. It's a DIY one, and I'm going to put a video out for it shortly, so keep an eye out for that one as well. Outside of the minimalistic look, the app is also super easy to use and has a massive selection of color options and intensities. Personally, I prefer this gradient style layout over the fluval individual color sliders. That system felt a little bit overwhelming, and trying to balance everything out with the perfect amount of each color was kind of frustrating. As well as a full range of color options, you can set up a full lighting schedule with ramp up and ramp down times, and incorporate any of the colors that you want to use within each of these periods. But the most useful feature of all is that it actually shows you some par guide values on the screen as well. It's not going to be perfect, but it does help you get a lot closer if you don't have a par meter. That was one of the biggest issues I struggled with the Fluval app. It was basically all just guesswork. So moving on to some of the other stuff that's happened in this tank. So the first thing that I added recently has been my pulsing xenia. This is one of my favorite corals. A lot of people don't like it, but I think it's really cool the way it interacts. And the guy I got this off locally here, he also threw in a leather coral. So this one's quite cool as well. So after just a typical bit of temperature acclimation, I ended up putting them straight in the tank. Normally I would do some coral dips, but I have heard that pulsing xenia doesn't dip very well sometimes, so I didn't want to risk it. For some reason it's quite hard to come by here. I don't know why, it's quite a common coral. So I just put it straight into the tank after a temperature acclimation, and I glued it straight onto a small piece of rock just to make sure that it has its own island and it's not going to go everywhere and basically take over my tank. The next coral I got is a Sinularia. I believe this one is fluoro green, and I made sure to dip this one too because I just had a weird vibe about it. It's doing really well, but as you can see here, there was a lot of critters on it. So some of these little guys are okay. There was a lot of other worms and stuff that came off it as well. So a long dip definitely got rid of most of those, and you can see in the little container here just how much life there was on this single piece of coral. Here's a better look of it from the top now. It's been in the tank for a couple of weeks at this stage. It's looking really healthy and really nice. The original green star polyp that I got had a bit of a weird phase. It went to sleep or went dormant for a couple of weeks. I actually thought it might have died, but then just semi-recently it's popped back out and it's looking really good. If anyone knows exactly what type this is, let me know because I'm not 100% sure. It's not a common one. It's got very small polyps, but it is growing quite fast as well. It's not all good news though. This is another one of my favorite corals here. I got this one quite early on, and it is a candy cane. For whatever reason, 2 of the heads are slowly starting to die off. The third one is kind of okay at the moment, but I don't think it's faring too well either. Not the best news, but it does happen. All of the snails are doing pretty well so far. I've got quite a lot of new ones in the tank now, which I'll cover a little bit further on in the video. I was a little bit worried the hermit crabs were going to annoy them, but so far so good, that hasn't been the case. My 2 little clownfish are also doing well. They're always trying to photobomb everything, so it is kind of hard to film stuff sometimes with these guys jumping straight into all the footage. Another really nice coral that I picked up here semi-recently, and surprisingly it grows faster than anything I've seen, is this Rhodactis mushroom. I think it's an Indonesian variety. I'll leave the name up on the screen anyway, because it is really cool and you might want to get some yourself. Seems to grow really easy and really fast, so again, it's on its own island just to make sure it doesn't take over the tank. I'm not 100% sure either, but it looks like my clowns might be trying to host it. It is still small, they do hang around it a little bit, so we'll see what happens. I've also added quite a few extra spare shells for my hermit crabs. They're starting to grow quite quickly, so I'm adding bigger shells for them, some smaller ones for some future hermit crabs I might add. But I dropped this old nerite snail in quite recently. It climbed out of one of my freshwater tanks and died on the ground. I think it was left on the floor for a couple of weeks, so it didn't make it. So I've just dropped it in here, and interestingly enough, it didn't take too long for the hermit crabs to come in and pull the remaining snail out of the shell and basically became food. And eventually, quite a big snail, but it will become a shell for one of these hermit crabs as they start to get bigger. It's actually really cool to see him just pulling out the old snail and eating it. Old Finnegan the fire shrimp did try to, but the hermit crab chased him away pretty quickly. That's his little cave there, and he almost never comes out of it. So the biggest addition to this tank so far, and kind of a little bit different to what I was planning, I had planned to probably do some sort of a mushroom garden, but that looks like we're going to have a half mushroom garden and half a zoa garden. So the reason for that is I found a seller here who was selling a ton of different kinds of zoas, and I got a really good deal. So I think I picked up about 9 different types here, as well as a handful of snails and a really cool bristle star. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. That was free, so the snails and the bristle star were free, and they came with the zoas. So I'll leave a list of all the different ones that I have on the screen here. I'm not 100% sure which is what just yet. There's so many different types, and I can't pin a name to each of them. They are really cool. The only problem I have at the moment is that I don't have a orange lens filter, so a lot of this footage is going to be coming out blue. If I adjust things in Davinci, I might be able to make it look a little bit closer to what the actual color renditions are, but it's still not going to be showing as good as this light can actually output the colors. Hopefully in some future videos I'll have some orange lens filters and you'll be able to see things a lot better with some more accurate colors. So here's just a quick look at the zoas that I've got. As you can see, there's quite a few different types. They've all settled in quite well, though depending on when I go and check on the tank, some of them aren't fully open yet, so this is probably the best shot I've got so far. So here's one final look at the tank so far from above, from left to right. It's been a while since I've cleaned anything, but it's still looking pretty good. You'll see the macroalgae at the back of the tank. I still haven't decided 100% what I'm going to do with that yet, though it has been really good at keeping my nitrates really low. As you can see, most of the corals are on the left side of the tank at the moment, which is in the kind of optimal place for the flow. So if you do have any suggestions for some soft corals that like really high flow, I can start placing those on the right hand side, because it is quite strong flow there.
I spend my days in despair, for in my mind you're still there. When nights turn cold and blue, how will I live without you? How will I live?
might say that I'm a loner, but I just call it being free. I am my heart's only owner, or at least I used to be. 'Cause now a wildfire is raging deep inside, and my heartstrings are pulling like the tide. And the match that drew a spark was a single stolen kiss.